There was a plane in World War II which was considered obsolete even when the war broke out, but still it became one of the symbols of the war, and stayed in service all along until the very end. Its shape, and especially its sound, are maybe the most notorious signs of the early war years and the success of the German forces over Europe. So let's see the history of the Junkers Ju-87 Stuka. Let's clear up the naming of the aircraft first. The Stuka is a short version for Sturzkampfflugzeug, literally meaning dive attack aircraft, which was used to every dive bombing aircraft, but later the shortened version became synonymous with the Ju-87. Also worth mentioning that the whistling bomb sound, well known to everyone from war movies, is also connected to the Stuka dive bombers. The Germans sometimes fitted whistles on the bomb fins, either as an alternative to the Jericho trumpet or used together with them. Normal bombs of course don't whistle, but the Stuka bombs often did. Now after this little detour, let's get on with the origins of the Ju-87 and the dive bombing as a principle itself. Though dive bombers are most well known from the Second World War, mostly because of the Stuka in Europe and the American and Japanese use in the Pacific, the dive bombing was not a new concept at that time. Its origins reach back to the First World War, when it was first tried by the British Royal Flying Corps. They found the bombing from their planes very inaccurate and encouraged their pilots to dive towards the target to get a better aim. This was a very dangerous task in an open cockpit of a wooden cloth biplane, which usually became the target of every gun on the ground. The British later ordered purpose-built planes for this role, the Sofit TF-2 Salamander, which was designed for ground attack role. These planes featured armor plating around the cockpit and fuel tanks, but they were not designed as dive bombers yet. After the First World War, many countries experimented with the dive bombers and their use and tactics. Though the dive bombing promised much more accuracy, the dangers to the plane and the pilot were much higher during the low-level dives. The RAF concluded tests with different planes, and though the bombing results were promising, they considered the danger to the aircrews too high. At the same time in the US, Billy Mitchell organized a series of bombing tests on old battleships. They tried several different tactics, including dive bombing, using Royal Aircraft Factory SE-5 dive bombers. In Germany, Ernst Udet, a famous pilot, was advocating dive bombing between the two world wars, and it was him who pushed the Ju-87 project forward. He became a fan of the concept after he observed some Curtiss Hawk dive bombers in the US. Since Germany couldn't afford to build a large fleet of heavy bombers, and under the Versailles Treaty they were not allowed to, so they were interested in the dive bomber concept, which allowed smaller single-engine bombers to destroy targets with much greater accuracy. Not everyone was enthusiastic about developing these kinds of dive bombers though. Wolfram from Richthofen, the head of development, didn't like the idea. He thought the planned planes were underpowered and slow. He envisioned some much more powerful twin-engine planes for the role, which could flee enemy fighters if needed. And with that we arrive to the development of the Ju-87. To learn how the Stuka was developed, we need to go back a bit in time. The story starts in 1924, when Junkers, to avoid the restrictions on German aircraft development after World War I, supported the founding of a company in Sweden, the AB Flyg Industry, which was basically the subsidiary of Junkers, but outside the control of the Versailles Treaty. Here, amongst other planes, they developed the purpose-built dive bomber, the K-47, originally for a request from Turkey. This was a two-seat open-cockpit conventional monoplane, heavily braced, to withstand the forces of the dive bombing role. This aircraft first flew in 1929, but eventually the Turkish government lost interest. Nonetheless, the experiences collected in the design helped Junkers in designing a new aircraft for the dive bomber role, the one which will later become the Ju-87. The development of the aircraft actually started in 1933, still in Sweden, and later the first prototype was shipped to Germany and finished there before its first flight in September 1935. The timing was quite fortunate for Junkers, as the RLM decided in April 1935 to set new specifications for a dive bomber program. 4 companies, Arado, Blohm & Voss, Heinkel and Junkers, were requested to enter their designs. Junkers with the Ju-87 already had a head start in front of the other companies, as they only needed a few months to finish their prototype. The 4 proposed planes were the Blohm & Voss HA-137, the Heinkel AG118, the Arado AR81 model, and finally the Junkers Ju-87. From the four designs, the AJ137 was dropped out first. Though it seemed a very good performing plane, the RLM wanted a rear gunner in their dive bomber, and this was a single-seater aircraft. Even though Junkers had a head start with their development, their work was not really as smooth as one would think. You might have already noticed something strange on the Ju-87 prototype picture, but if you haven't, look at it again. The original V1 prototype featured a twin-tail design, carried over from the K-47, which used it to give the rear gunner a better field of fire. But as it turned out, the twin tail caused fluttering dives, and because of that the prototype crashed in January 1936. Because of this, the tail section on the V2 prototype was redesigned and received a conventional single fin tail. Junkers also had to modify the power plant, as the original prototype was planned to use the Rolls-Royce Kestrel engines, but that was unacceptable for the RLM. Junkers proposed to change it to a Daimler DB601, and planned the final variant to use the UMO 210 engine. The competitive testing of the three remaining aircraft started in March 1936. It became clear early on that the Arado AR81 with its conventional biplane design won't be a contender. The Heinkel and the Junkers were the two planes to decide between. The Ju-87 was a much simpler and sturdier design, while the Heinkel a more sleek and advanced one, featuring an internal bomb bay and retractable landing gears. The two different views on the dive bombers clashed again, as Richthofen supported the Heinkel design, while Udet preferred the Ju-87. As Richthofen was the head of development in the Luftwaffe Technical Service, and he liked the Heinkel plane, on June 9, 1936, the RLM notified Junkers to cease the development of the Ju-87, as the Heinkel design will be the winner. Interestingly, just the next day, Richthofen was promoted to Chief of Staff of the Condor Legion. He was transferred to Spain, and Udet was moved into his seat as head of development. His first order was to notify Junkers to continue with the project. In the next month, he personally flew the Heinkel prototype in a test. When he went in a dive, the engine oversped and the propeller broke away. The plane crashed, but Udet bailed out and landed safely. Though Heinkel insisted they warned him to adjust the propeller before diving, he announced the Ju-87 as the winner of the competition. The plane was accepted to service, and with that we have arrived to the variants of the Stuka. The first A variant was powered by the UMO 210 12-cylinder engine, producing 600 horsepower, and it was a very underpowered aircraft. This variant could only carry a single 250 kg bomb, or a 500 kg one if the rear gunner was not on board. The A version is easy to recognize from the large trousers on the gear legs and the dual radio masts. They were planned to receive 4 7.92mm machine guns in the wings, but because of the weight increase, this was decreased to only 2. The following B variant brought a lot of improvements: a completely redesigned airframe, landing gear, and the new UMO 211 engine with twice the performance, producing 1200 horsepower. This variant featured a sloped nose, simpler landing gear design, and a single radio mast. With the more powerful engine, this version was able to carry a 500 kg bomb together with the crew. This version was the first to feature the signature Jericho trumpets. The C variant was not a straightforward evolution, but a specialized version built for the Navy. It was meant to be used on the planned Graf Zeppelin aircraft carrier, and showed many different features accordingly: a catapult attachment, landing hook, folding wings, a jettisonable landing gear, and flotation devices under the wings. This variant was cancelled when the work on the aircraft carrier stopped. The R version had a very low production run, and these were built for long-range operation, mainly to be used against shipping. They were basically identical to the B models, except an additional oil tank and extra fuel lines in the wings, allowing the use of external drop tanks. Because of the added weight, they were restricted to carry only one 250 kg bomb. The D version featured a lot of upgrades. Again, a new more powerful 1400 horsepower engine, a redesigned airframe, a more streamlined nose, and a redesigned and more aerodynamic canopy. The new engine allowed the installation of more armor plating and a new double machine gun on the rear. This version also featured the same drop tank option that was introduced with the R model. They could carry a 1000 kg bomb under the fuselage, or optionally even an 1800 kg one, but only for short ranges. Under the wings, it could either carry small 50 kg bombs or optionally gun pods. The last G variant was basically reinvented in a new role. The Stuka by 1943 was not very effective anymore, and the Germans needed a tank hunter aircraft on the Eastern Front. So these variants were equipped with 37mm anti-tank guns under the wings. To protect the aircrew, the engineers copied the armor plating from the Soviet IL-2 attack planes. The G variant was not a new design, they were rebuilt from D airframes for this purpose. Now let's see the technical specifications of the Ju-87D variant. The D variant used the UMO 211J V12 engine, producing 1400 horsepower. It could reach a maximum speed of 410 km an hour and had a cruise speed of 319 km an hour. The plane's operational range was 1500 km and had a service ceiling of 7300 meters. Its armament consisted of two 7.92mm machine guns in the wings and double 7.92 machine guns in the rear. It could carry a maximum of 1800 kg of bomb load, but the usual loadout was between 500 and 1000 kg. The Stuka made its debut in the Spanish Civil War with the Condor Legion, though only a few of them were shipped to Spain to be tested in real combat. They proved to be very accurate against their targets, and they were considered so top secret that not even Spanish ground crews were allowed near them. The experiences gathered there helped to develop the Ju-87 further. In the invasion of Poland, most of them were expected to do their part, but just a few weeks before the start of the Polish campaign, an incident cast a shadow on the Stuka reputation. In August 1939, during a training exercise while they were practice dive bombing, almost all the participating planes were lost. Because of the unexpectedly low cloud cover, they all crashed to the ground, as when they were breaking out of the clouds, they found themselves at very low altitude. But the doubts about the plane's performance quickly disappeared after the invasion of Poland, as the Stuka again proved to be very effective and accurate. They roamed the skies freely, as the German fighters protected them from the opposition. The Stukas destroyed trains and bombed the Polish infantry at will, and they sank most of the Polish navy in the first few days of the war. They were key elements of the German blitzkrieg, as the fast-moving armored forces could call on them anytime they needed help. Some Ju-87s took part in the invasion of Norway as well, where they proved to be devastating against the Royal Navy. They sunk 3 destroyers and a support ship in this operation. Later in 1940, during the Battle of France, the Stuka again proved its worth, being just as useful as in the invasion of Poland. And just like before, the Luftwaffe ruled the skies, so they battered the French and British forces at will. During the Battle of Dunkirk, the Luftwaffe damaged or sank more than 100 civilian and military ships as they tried to evacuate the Allied forces from the harbor, most of them credited to the Ju-87s. This was the high point for the Stuka, and the reason their image is forever tied to the success of the German blitzkrieg, but nothing lasts forever. Soon after, during the Battle of Britain, it became clear that the slow and vulnerable Ju-87 is easy prey for enemy fighters if the German Air Force is not in complete control of the skies. They were withdrawn from the operation just after a month, as their losses started to mount. However, they still found a lot of success over the Mediterranean and on the Balkans, where they could operate with relative safety. They attacked British convoys on their way to Africa and Malta. Their biggest target was the aircraft carrier HMS Illustrious. It came under heavy attack in January 10, 1941, and received 6 direct bomb hits, but managed to get away, no small thanks to her armored flight deck. They also saw action in Greece and Yugoslavia, where again they could operate with almost no resistance in the air, and they delivered great blows to the enemy ground forces. During the Battle of Crete, the Germans again were held back by the British naval forces, and again it was the job for the Stukas to deal with the Royal Navy ships. In the span of 3 days they managed to sink or damage at least 10 British ships. After the Allies retreated from South Europe, the Ju-87s were used in North Africa as well, helping Rommel's Africa Corps. Initially they were successful here too, but as the Allied empire got stronger in the area, the tide slowly turned. The situation got worse when the US forces arrived as well. By 1943 the Allies ruled the skies over North Africa, and the Stuka losses quickly started to mount, as they had little cover from the German fighters. On the Eastern Front during Operation Barbarossa in 1941, the Stuka again proved to be devastating, as the Soviet Air Force was scattered and mostly destroyed by the Luftwaffe, so they could fly without much opposition from the enemy fighters. They were free to attack trains, supply lines, and the Soviet Navy ships. But the Soviet Air Force was quickly rebuilt, and by 1943 the Stuka couldn't enjoy complete freedom, and they started to lose a lot of aircraft, as they were pushed into more and more action trying to stop the Red Army's advance. By the last years of the war, the Stuka numbers were reduced, many of them were replaced by Focke-Wulf 190 fighters, and the fuel shortages also grounded many aircraft. The few remaining Ju-87s were in use until the end of the war. In fact, one of the last German propaganda films showing an anti-tank G version shooting at Soviet tanks just outside Berlin in the last weeks of the war. The Ju-87 Stuka was considered obsolete by many even before World War II, but still it became one of the key to the German successes, and it is forever will be a symbol of this war. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please leave a like, subscribe to my channel, and in the comments let me know if there's any interesting events or vehicles you'd like to see.